Happy December, everyone. We are so glad that you've joined us for our last Big Think of 2025. Today's conversation actually has a little bit of an origin story. So a few months ago, I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across Lead by Learning's post about their library staff community of practice. Here at What School Could Be, we've been talking about having a Big Think conversation with school librarians for a very long time. But whenever we tried to organize it, for some reason, the timing between ourselves and our potential guests was never really in alignment. So seeing that Instagram post was really a sign for us that it was time to try it again. And luckily, with the help of our friends at Lead by Learning, we were finally able to bring this very, very important conversation to all of you. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest today. First, we have Sarah Sugarman. Sarah believes in the power of learning communities that honors educators' professionalism, where colleagues supportively challenge each other to hone their practice in service of equitable outcomes for students. As Senior Director at Lead by Learning, she ensures organizational coherence between Lead by Learning's partnership programs and its visibility and community engagement initiatives, as well as overseeing some staff development and evaluation and quality assurance programs. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Next, we have Allison Bogie. Allison is in her 21st year as an educator, and she currently works as a teacher librarian at Berkeley High School in Berkeley, California. She goes to work every day to live out her belief that well-funded, professionally staffed libraries are an essential ingredient for schools, providing a safe and nurturing space for all students to learn and thrive. When she's not at school, you can find Allison swimming, spending time with her family, and sewing. Hey, Allison.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. And last but not least, we have Samantha Solomon. So Sam joined Orange Unified School District as an English teacher in 2011. In 2017, she had the pleasure of reopening the Calvin Simmons Library, which serves students in grades 6 through 12. After being closed for 9 years, the library now sees about 80 drop-in students a day and partners with teachers and classes for lessons around research and media literacy. When not at school, you might find Sam on roller skates, camping, or surprise reading while cuddling her cats, Albert and Minerva. Hi, Sam.
Thanks so much for having me. Sorry.
No problem. So to begin with, I'd really love to start kind of at the heart of what libraries really are. When I was in elementary school, we would have these walking field trips up to the public library because we weren't lucky enough to have our own school library. And as soon as you walked in, I remember being like transported into this whole other place. Like everyone spoke in these hushed tones and we would be gathered together for storytelling. And of course, if you've been in a bookstore or a library, there's this very distinct smell of books. I love that smell. So as I'm telling this story now, I can see the aspects of community that were being woven into the library at that point in time. But primarily, when I was younger, I saw the library as a place for books. And as magical and wonderful as that is, we know that there is this larger purpose today. So before I get your thoughts on that, I want to invite in our audience right now with a really quick prompt. So audience members, if you're listening, can you tell us one word that describes how you felt in your school library as a child? Just go ahead and drop it in the chat. So while those words are rolling in, Allison, maybe we can start with you. when and where did you have sort of that realization that a library is about so much more than books?
I think I shared sort of a childhood experience with you, which was like a lot of the public library visits were to get books, and I would leave with stacks of books. I remember just checking out like huge bunches. And I've really changed my perspective on libraries from becoming a school librarian. It's been like a slow process of realizing how much the library matters to students and to school. And that's really the place where I've seen that the library is so much more. Are you all able to hear me? I'm getting like kind of pictures cutting in and out.
You're good.
Okay, great.
We're seeing some
yeah,
really great...
I think just understanding that how much people. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Allison. Finish your story, please.
Go ahead if someone else wants to chime in.
Okay, I just wanted to chime in, Sam, before you give your answer, that there are a whole bunch of words in the chat right now: curious, freedom, possibility, nurtured, fun, calm. So love all of those. Sam, what are you thinking? When did you find out that a library was about more than books?
Yeah, I mean, so I was definitely a library kid like Allison, where I was like, yeah, the books, guys, it's huge for me. And checking out all of the books and like what I think people think school libraries are on the surface did really work for me individually as a kid, like a quiet space, a calm space, a reading space. And I think when I became a classroom teacher, which is what I was before I was a school librarian, like it was immediately really clear to me that that kind of space is actually not fun and accessible for every kind of kid. And so as a teacher, right, and as a librarian, I'm trying to always find entry points for kids into spaces and reading places. So even just a year ago, I had a theme for the school year, which is what our library's for. And I spent a lot of time and class time showing kids like libraries are for coloring, they're for relaxing, they're for reading, they're for research, they're for following your passions. And so I think it really clicked for me as an adult that like obvious thing that libraries are for is only one tiny part of it.
Love that. Sarah, any thoughts about libraries?
Yeah, well, similar to Allison, I spent a lot of time checking out enormous boxes and bags of books as a child. But what I thought about also was in high school and college, how the libraries were a real sanctuary for me, where I spent not just time reading, but also time writing. I would journal, I would work on papers, and it was really inspirational to be surrounded by so much other writing to then be generating the writings that I was doing both creatively and for school. So I think of libraries also as very generative, creative places.
That's amazing. It sounds like Nick Salman in the chat, he's also thinking about that. As his comment says, I hope that we can think of librarians as chefs rather than as checkout clerks. A library can be a place to create new media and share it with the world. I love that. So Allison, oh, is Allison in here? Nope, she dropped out.
She said that she may be relocating to a computer with a better signal.
Sounds good. So Sam, I'm going to jump to actually an article that you had shared. And it was published. It's actually published on the Lead by Learning blog. So we'll bring up a link so that people can read that entire article. But what's really interesting about that to me is that you're talking about how you're supporting teachers in a school library. And so I'm wondering about your work in that arena and how supporting teachers translates into actually supporting the students.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mel. I think that it's really easy to think of our library stakeholders in a school library setting as our students, and they definitely are. But when you can unlock things for the teachers, I think like your library services will really open up. So I was last year doing collaborations with a lot of English and ELD teachers, which I think are kind of like the obvious places where like, oh yeah, kids are reading in those classes. It's about books. And I really wanted to invite school staff to interact with libraries in different ways, because I think it can be hard for science or math teachers to like conceptualize how this kind of collaboration might work. So one of the very first things I did was just like invite them over for breakfast with like a secret ulterior motive. I was like, come to the library, have breakfast, have coffee, and like let me sneakily project some slides about all the cool stuff that we're doing and be like, oh my gosh, did you see that student from your class? Look at them in that picture. What if you brought them? And so my message to teachers always is like, whatever your thing is, that's my thing. So in that setting with kids and teachers, we talked about it can be research, it can be SSR and like independent reading, it can be curated resources, it can be an art project. And so I also talked to a reluctant collaborator about like what felt like a barrier to entry to him, and all of that stuff kind of came together to unlock collaborating with more than half of my staff last year in grades 6 through 12 in almost every department. And I felt really lucky to be able to serve more kids that way, because that's the real piece for me, is that unlocking for staff members what library collaboration can look like means that more kids get to access the library.
Absolutely. And it feels like that collaboration, that invitation to collaborate actually made the library a very safe space for your teachers as well.
Yeah, I really tried to like hit home for them that like, you don't have to bring me a finished idea, right? Part of my job as your collaborator is to help you kind of build out that idea. So if you want to say, oh, like I had a teacher come to me today and say, it's something about AI. And I was like, great, let's talk through what is that something about AI? And so we're getting to the point where still, it's a process and it's messy. And I think it's tempting to tell teachers that it's easier to collaborate with me, but it's not easier. It's work to talk it through, but it makes the thing that we create together more rich and more meaningful and more powerful for students. And I think it's worth it.
Totally. Yeah. Allison, I'm glad to see you're resettled.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, not a problem at all. Sam was actually just telling us a little bit about the article that she had written that's on the Lead by Learning blog. And I know you also sent an article while we were getting ready for this, and it was called Libraries as Wellbeing Supportive Spaces in Contemporary Schools. So we'll make sure to drop a link for that too for our audience. But would you be able to tell us a little bit from the article and maybe your own experience about how libraries really do support learners' emotional and social well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that I think a lot about as a librarian. Kids need a space, and the physical space of the library is almost like another service that's provided that goes beyond who we are as teachers, who we are when we say hi when they come in. Of course, that's part of the environment. But I just walked back through my library from one room into my office, and there were kids like tucked into the stacks, sitting and reading, kids who I had seen at school today. And school is so intense, and Berkeley High has so many people. And I know I actually have parents often come to me and say, thank you so much for the environment that you're creating at the school. My students really depend on having that quiet and calm place. And we as teachers have the role also of kind of keeping the kids who come in here physically safe. Kids don't have to talk to us when they come in, other than like they have to show us a pass if it's not, if they're supposed to be in class or what have you. But they know that they're going to be supervised here essentially, and that nobody's going to come in and like bother them because we're strict. Those of us who work here. And so I appreciate just the literal space. And then the many things that we offer, I think, enhances that. Like all of the books, having the kind of diverse books that we have now in 2025, while yes, some of them are being complained about or they're being banned in certain places, kids see themselves in books. Queer kids, kids of color, kids who are going through really hard things in their lives. And I think that books as mirrors is part of what makes the library feel safe. Also, we have like displays up for our students of different classes. Like we have an Asian American Pacific Islander literature class, Black history class, Latine literature and history, and we have special sections in the library highlighting books for those classes. And that's part of the work of maintaining this space for students too.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm going to have to ask you just a slightly different question since you're outside of the library, but I'm wondering about your observations in the library staff community of practice. how does that help sort of illuminate this role that Allison and Sam have been talking about of caringness and connectedness and belonging? How does that community of practice help support that?
Yeah. Well, I think more and more today, and at Lead by Learning, we're no exception, folks are seeing librarians and school librarians in particular as real leaders in their communities, right? Not just the folks who are helping kids get books in their hands, although of course they do that as well. But as you just heard from Sam and Allison, they're doing so much more to create opportunities for folks to connect with each other, connect with learning, engage in research, engage with media in responsible ways. So the librarian is really a leader in so many ways and needs support for that leadership. And so that's where the idea for the community of practice came from, that in order to provide these kinds of experiences for adults and for students, the librarians themselves need those experiences in their own learning. So we like to say at Lead by Learning that you can't lead something you haven't experienced for yourself. So for Sam to be able to create these opportunities to collaborate with adults, she herself needs that experience of collaborating with other librarians to tap into that creativity, that sense of curiosity, that inquiry. And then Allison was talking about creating that sanctuary space, that kind of space of social and emotional belonging, connection. Similarly, the librarians need that a space for themselves where they can come and feel that sense of belonging, feel that they're getting to share their challenges, their dilemmas, their wonderings with other folks who really deeply understand their context and what they might be going through. And at the same time are from different contexts and can offer different perspectives based on what they see in their systems in their schools. So that's the kind of work that happens in the community of practice. And so folks are getting that experience for themselves and being able to then magnify that back at their schools.
That's awesome. So let's, I think this is a good place to sort of shift from the role, from the space itself, the library space, to your roles as librarians, because I've never been a librarian, but as a tech coordinator, I had often collaborated with the library staff at my school. And so one of the things that I learned is that librarians have these huge responsibilities and roles that no one else ever sees. You know, these are all the things that are happening behind the scenes to create these really magical spaces. And so maybe Sam, if we could start with you, do you have a time when you maybe ended up doing something as a librarian that people would not have expected, but actually made like this huge difference for either a student in your library or a colleague?
Yeah. I mean, in a given day, and so many things can happen in a school building. Yesterday, my principal was in the library working and taking like a meeting on Zoom, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm researching cozy reading practices around the world to show kids for SSR." So it can be so many things. I think the thing that about being a librarian that's so different from being a classroom teacher is when I taught English, nobody ever asked me like, what do you do all day? And I've had colleagues ask that to me as a librarian. And what it really made clear to me is that it's my job to storytell and highlight those things that we do that maybe go unnoticed. So like in a given day, I'm curating resources. I had a student show up twice today to the library who was having a really hard day and just like needed that safe space that Allison is talking about. I had a meeting with a teacher about a research project. And so I think it's the variety for me that is really powerful about this work. And maybe people don't realize like all of the things that we touch.
Yeah. Allison, how about you? Any thoughts that you want to add to what Sam said?
I think that the place where the impact happens, like I'm thinking about the instructional role of us as librarians, and I've had so many times where teachers I can share a specific one. When I was a middle school librarian, a teacher came to me and said, I want to have my kids work on nonfiction. And we ended up like creating nonfiction. Each of them, because we were two adults working on this project, ended up researching and creating an entire nonfiction book. We did art in the library. We repurposed discarded books from other places. Kids had these text features like wheels and flaps in their books that they had put together. And at the end, she said there's no way that one person could do something like this all by themselves, because it requires more space, more knowledge, and also kind of more brain space. We have this amazing privilege that we're not seeing the same 150, 200 kids every single day and taking attendance and entering grades. We have a little bit more space, which allows us to give that space back to our adults in the way that they need. And kind of hold, just have a little more grace with them, but also like provide them with that support. Is kind of what Sarah was talking about with Lead by Learning. It's like we experience the support with Lead by Learning, and we can turn around and not only do that for ourselves in community, but with our teachers as well. And I think that in collaboration with us as librarians, teachers are able to really elevate their research assignments beyond what is necessarily viable. Not that the teachers couldn't do it, but I think it's like a two heads are really strong together type of scenario. So I think that's an example of really making an impact beyond, checking out books or even like a one-off research lesson, but like a really robust collaboration on a project.
That's such a cool one.
Yeah.
It was so fun.
Sarah, when you go on the Lead by Learning website, one of the things that it says on there is you don't have to carry the weight of change alone. So I know that collaborative inquiry is really just part of the ethos of Lead by Learning. So I'm wondering, like, how have you seen collaborative inquiry play a role in supporting these librarians? Do you have any specific stories that you might want to share about that?
Yeah, well, I love that you noticed that on our website. I mean, we talk often about how there's this myth of certainty in education, that there's this myth that there's the right way of doing something. And if we can just figure out the right way of doing the thing, whether that's in the library or a classroom or in a leadership role, then kids will learn and everything will be fine. But what we know to be true is that actually education and leadership are tremendously uncertain crafts. And the real only truth is that the way we do our work well is by facing those uncertainties every single day and acknowledging how much we don't know. And so the value of collaborative inquiry is that it's a safe place for folks to come together and say, here's what I'm still trying to figure out. Here's what I tried, and here's what's actually not yet working. And to really connect with what do I want to see happening now that I know what's not working, now that I know where I'm hitting some roadblocks or some pitfalls, I can be more clear about what I want to do. And this community is a space to help me figure out how I can move toward that vision. So what I've seen often happen in the community of practice is folks switch their mindset away from kind of suggestion mode, like, why don't you try this? Or why don't you try that? To really engaging in a more listening and curious stance. Well, so I might ask Allison or Sam, like, tell me more about what you're seeing in your library. Or tell me about a conversation you had with a student lately that made you ask this question. So we really dig in together about what that data, we call everything is data, what that data is telling us. And rather than ping-ponging suggestions, which may or may not work given your different contexts, the goal is really to more deeply understand what's happening together. And then from that place of understanding, the librarian or the educator can then sort of have that sense of, oh, okay, now I'm starting to see my path forward because you've helped me see more clearly what's going on the ground.
It sounds like you provide a really important space for reflection as well, once they do try out these different things that they're curious or wondering about.
Absolutely. I mean, the school day and the after school time is so fast, as they've both been mentioning, so many things happen moment to moment. And so the community of practice space is an opportunity to sort of step off that hamster wheel and get that pause to really notice deeply what is going on so that I can move more clearly when I get back on the wheel tomorrow.
Well, we've been talking about this community of practice right now, and it's what actually is making this conversation so special today. Just so our audience members know, it is a multi-district learning community for library staff, which feels very groundbreaking to me. So, in the spirit of collaborative learning, I'm going to pull our audience into this again. And I'm going to ask all of you out there, who's someone in your own learning space that you naturally learn with? Please feel free to name them in the chat or just tell us their role. And Sarah, as the chat fills up, maybe you can describe a little bit more about this initiative so our audience sort of understands the nuts and bolts of this program that you folks are running.
Well, at Lead by Learning, we lead communities of practice for all different types of educators across the system, from school day to after school, from classroom teachers to principals to district leaders. And so the librarian community of practice came about in partnership with our colleagues at 21 CSLA at UC Berkeley. And all of us together were noticing that there were this huge group of educators, of practitioners out there who often engaged in collaboration at their sites, but are also often the only or one of the only people in their role at their site. And so they didn't have opportunities to come together in that role alike space very often with other librarians to really dig deeply into those questions and dilemmas that are specific to their brand or their type of leadership. And so what we do in our space is support each librarian to connect with a dilemma or a challenge or a pain point that they're experiencing, usually related to some kind of equity issue in their library, and to start to gather some data from the daily happenings in their library to better understand what's going on, what's getting in the way of equitable access or equitable learning experiences for all kids in their space. And then through conversations together, as I mentioned, really starting to tease apart, well, what's within my locus of control? What can I start to tweak or change? And how will I understand if those changes are helping have the impact that I want to see for kids and for adults in my space?
So Allison and Sam, I want to hear from you folks how this is actually supported and helped your thinking, grow your practice as a result of being part of Lead by Learning's initiative. Allison, could we start with you? Has there been some big changes as a result of sharing with your peers or the way people have been vulnerable maybe in this space?
Yeah. Lead by Learning is so magical. It's like one of the places where I feel really held as a professional, and I think that's not to be underestimated. And one of the things that I learned through my inquiry that I use really regularly is actually about research instruction. I was wondering, along with another librarian, how we could get students to take a pause before they first start their research and think about what they're looking for, because we were noticing that whenever kids were doing projects, they would just like get on the computer right away and start putting into Google, and they weren't getting the results they needed. And so what we decided to do was investigate this like as our inquiry line with Lead by Learning. And we actually chose focal students, which is something that we often are encouraged to do with Lead by Learning, and interviewed them. And we started by speaking with students who were researching successfully and weren't just jumping on the computer right away. And we learned from them to find out what habits of mind they were applying to starting their research, so that we could find out kind of like, what do successful students do, and how can we then make that really transparent for all students who may not have learned those skills before. And so that took like the few students who really were able to already do this, we were able to learn from them. And what we learned is that students were taking a pause and they were thinking about what kind of information they wanted to find or that they may anticipate finding before they started researching. And then they were using that to generate keywords, but they were doing it all kind of subconsciously. And we didn't realize until we actually had conversations with them. And the amazing thing is, I think that even though that's an inquiry that I did in the past, it's actually something that I apply every single time I teach research. I've introduced like a pre-research component and then a metacognitive reflective piece at the end of any research lesson. And it's been amazing to see just how that's evolved and how useful it is for all students, whether it's like music, history, English, science research, anything like that. So, and I really credit that process with Lead by Learning to helping me implement that kind of standardized practice in my research instruction.
Yeah, that metacognitive piece is just, it's so important, not just for teachers to kind of get in the heads of their learners, but also for the learners themselves, right? To kind of understand how they're learning and how they might, move forward and make growth with that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Sam, on something that's changed your practice as a result of being in the community of practice?
Yeah, I was so lucky to first get to start working with Lead by Learning as a classroom teacher when I was teaching 6th grade English at Life Academy. And it really allowed me to like name and refine a stance that I think that like I was naturally taking and a lot of teachers naturally take, which is like, see a problem, try a thing. And then keep doing that until you're getting closer to where you hope you can be. But Lead by Learning does it with like such elegance and so like fully thought out. And so that on its own is really, really powerful. And librarians are often solo at our sites, right? Like Allison is really lucky. She has a counterpart at Berkeley High who's amazing. But like for a long time, I was the only high school teacher librarian in the Oakland Unified School District. So I really, you're looking all the time for somebody to talk it through with. And so in our community of practice, we get to talk to people who have roles that are similar to ours or the same as ours in contexts that are similar or really different. And that's really powerful, that cross-district aspect that you were mentioning, because I mean, every library, even the one in my own district that's right down the street, is really different, the context that we're operating in. And so it's so powerful to like go through that inquiry process with another person and have them reflect back to you kind of through the prism of their own experience and knowledge, like what you're saying and what you're grappling with, and help you find your own answers that will work for you in your own context.
Oh my gosh. I think that's the perfect spot for us to just pause so that we can share all of the different things that are happening in our What School Could Be community for a second. So next week, I just want to let everyone know that on December 9th, we have an Eye on Student Protagonism event. And it's featuring middle schooler Sanjay Divakar, and he's the creator of Role Color Finder. This is a platform that uses color psychology and behavioral science to help people understand their leadership styles. So you can hear about this more directly from Sanjay by registering to attend for free at whatschoolcouldbe.org/events. We'd also love for you to take a listen to episode 156 of host Josh Rapoon's What School Could Be podcast. You'll hear snippets of the original conversations with his guests from 6 different episodes around the topic of good ancestry and cathedral thinking. So you can listen to that anywhere that you get your podcasts. We also have a new documentary from executive producer Ted Dintersmith called Multiple Choice. It challenges the College for All narrative by spotlighting a Virginia school district who's redefining success through career-based learning. You can learn more about how to watch this film or host a screening of your own at multiplechoicefilm.org. And finally, last but not least, we invite you to join our free global online community of education change agents. There you can connect and discover powerful stories that will inspire you and fuel change in your own learning spaces, wherever they might be. So please sign up for free at community.whatschoolcouldbe.org. And speaking of our online community, we've actually been posting in there about this conversation for about a month now. And one of the big ideas that sort of emerged from the conversations is the sense that perhaps a library is shifting away from its role as a hub where people would travel to instead to something different, maybe. So I grabbed a few of these questions directly from our community so that you could perhaps give them some answers to those. So in the first question from one of our community members, it says, one image I use a lot in my work with schools is an ecosystem. I'm wondering how libraries might continue and even become visionary leaders in contributing to the ecology of a healthy community. How might their reach be farther and deeper if they are less central and more a part of a weave? Any thoughts on that?
You want to go for it, Sam? I'm happy to respond also.
Yeah, I mean, Allison, I think, is like so eloquent on the topic of libraries as like third places and community spaces and civic places and places you can be for free. I think that like whether it's online or in person, libraries can and do those things all the time, public libraries and school libraries. And I think it's just another kind of expression of like our thing is your thing, right? Libraries thing, whether it is your thing to come in here and sit and read, or your thing to engage with library posts and social media, or your thing to do research on library databases from home, like libraries have and are doing those things.
I think that newer, like sort of the newer school librarian culture also involves the librarians. We already do this. We leave the library. We go to classrooms. It's really fun to walk around the school. Berkeley High is very big. Kids are always stopping me, saying hi. I'll go to teacher classrooms. My colleague, Ms. Irby, and I often go and teach in classrooms rather than having the librarians come here, depending on what type of assignment it is. And because we do so many things that aren't just library based as leaders, as Sarah said, in our school, I think we naturally actually are more woven into the community than maybe historically librarians have been.
Sarah, there's another question that's similar, but I think you might be able to answer it a little bit better. So this person is saying, in the hub and learning center metaphor, that was part of their media specialist training in the 90s. I wonder what other images or metaphors might be emerging as we look forward and live in these really transformative times. So I'm wondering, across the COP, what sort of ideas or metaphors about ecosystem thinking are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I love the idea of the ecosystem. And just to riff off of that for a minute, the ecosystem comes from the idea of change. Like a living system is constantly in flux or in some kind of change. And when change stops, that means the system has died or is no longer evolving. And so ecosystems constantly go through times when they're in great disorder or disequilibrium. And then there's some kind of leap forward and like a new kind of equilibrium is found. But the cycles happen over and over again as ecosystems grow and change. And so I think of that as a library as kind of representative of that inside of a school community or a district community where change is the norm. Schools are constantly changing. Students are constantly changing. Educators are changing. The politics around us is changing. Demographics are changing. So to have a library that is a healthy ecosystem means that it can weather that kind of change, right? It can have ways to grow and be in flux and find new times of equilibrium in between those times or along with those times of great change. And so I feel like that's what Allison and Sam and all the other wonderful librarian educators are constantly doing, is navigating change, but finding ways to have their systems be healthy and resilient and responsive along the way. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of what was coming up for me with this idea of ecosystems.
It did. There's another question that came from our community, and they're asking that they're wondering if there are examples of libraries where reciprocity happens. So kind of in the way that you're talking about this really healthy ecosystem, it's not just the library, but it's also the patrons, the people who are coming to it as well, right? So they're saying the community not only comes to the library to gain information and resources, but also to contribute in the spirit of the Library of Alexandria. I'm thinking libraries are great places to get what I need, but is there also a movement for libraries to be places that I can give to? And what might that look like?
This brought up a project that just happened in the library, actually, which was one of the art teachers asked to collaborate with us for the first time, which is always a highlight for me whenever a teacher wants to collaborate for the first time with a library. I feel like, I have to be the ambassador. So that teacher brought in their students to get to know graphic novels and zines, and then the students were making zines. And then the teacher messaged me and said, could the students put their zines in the library in your zine cart? And so they brought them to me. I went around and chatted with the students about their zines on all different kinds of topics. And now those zines are cataloged, have barcodes on them, and can be checked out by other students and read in the library. And they'll be used in our 9th grade lesson that we do in the spring, where students sit down at a table and read their peers' zines. So that'll be like a structured activity. So that was one of the things that came right to mind. And the zines are so beautiful. It was really like, they're sitting on my desk nearby. It brought me so much joy.
Oh my gosh. Talk about like real purposeful learning, right? For them to have that. Now their work is being used by other people regularly in the library.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, one more from our community, and it's Ray Oldenburg coined the phrase, third places, and Robert Putnam discussed its fading in society circa the early 2000s. Make a case for the library as the return of the third place. Who would maybe disagree with that argument, and why do you think that?
I mean, it's tough because I don't think I know anybody who would disagree with it. I think the bubble, but I know a lot of librarians, so it's definitely a bubble that I'm part of. I think that libraries, whether like public or school libraries, like are that third space presently. Kids, in a school setting, kids come here at their lunchtime. It's a time where they could choose to be a lot of places, but they choose to be here together, playing board games, coloring. I have an art station out every month. This month they're playing with Play-Doh. And it's a place where they don't have a task. School is really task oriented. Rightfully, it makes a lot of sense in a lot of places in a school that there's like a thing you have to do while you're here. And libraries, most of the time, are not that, right? Like it's a spot where kids can come and pursue intellectual curiosity, or like curiosity about what can they make, or what can they do, or what can they learn, how can they be together. I have kids who I see every day who never check out a book. They just come and be here with their friends and cuddle a bunch of Squishmallows that we got from Donors Choose. And that's all, that's exactly a community third space to me.
Yeah, exactly. Allison, this is sort of making me think of, I think it was you that had said earlier that as you walked past, you saw students who are like tucked into the corners and things. I mean, that's not us defining the third space. That's really the learners, the youth, right, doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the third space has gone away. I grew up in the Bay Area and I've lived here as an adult for a pretty long time, but our public libraries and school libraries that are open are thriving. There are always people waiting to get in, staying until the last minute. I have to like herd kids out at the end of the day when we close. The third space is in demand by the community, and it's available to people who don't necessarily have resources. They may or may not. And I think that's something we need to name about the library and about the library as a third space is it's equally available to everyone. You don't have to pay to come into the library. You don't have to pay to use anything from the library. And we have to honor and like maintain that third space for everybody, not just for people with that privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine anybody saying the library is not a third space, especially listening to the stories you all have been sharing with us. What we're going to do right now is we're going to bring Lynn Svengross on stage with us. So Lynn is no stranger on our Big Think. She's our What School Could Be Eastern strategist. But in today's conversation, what I'm going to actually ask Lynn to do is tap into her past role as a high school English teacher. And use that as one of the lenses through which she's viewing this conversation so far. So, Lynn, what thoughts or questions are sort of rising to the surface for you?
Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, so much. I think, first of all, as I was reading about your backgrounds in preparation for tonight, and then listening to your conversation over the last 45 minutes, there's just these memories that flood my mind about my 30 plus years in high schools and walking into the library, which then became media centers, and you've said a lot of these things already, but the place where students found respite during lunch, it was the quiet space. They could escape all the noise, or kids hanging out after school. And I have memories of the tolerant and kind librarians when we brought our classes in, and they worked along, collaborated with me, but also we used that space for our pop-up maker spaces, and just so many wonderful memories of the library. And I think one of my questions was, okay, so you've this ecosystem and this incredible culture that you create in that space. Do you think, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, or if you could influence culture in other spaces in the building, in your school, what would you hope to see as an extension of what you've created?
One of the things I really like about being a librarian is that I guess I'll say it this way. When I was a classroom teacher, it felt like very important to me that things happen kind of precisely in my classroom, and like kids move through a process with, like, everybody getting everything, because that is your job when you're a classroom teacher, right? Is to make sure that kids are getting the learning and the information and the standard and the experience that they need to be successful in the next grade and in life. And in the library, I'm like Allison said, we have this a little bit of extra space to allow kids to be curious, to like allow a process to be messy, whether it's in collaboration with a grown-up, or as a kid is like coming in and asking about a topic and trying to, like, I have a kid right now in 8th grade who's like really obsessed with books about death. And he's just like, let's, get into it. And I'm like, okay, let's go. Right. And so like, we have this a little more time and a little more space to like let people be human and be in process and be messy and be curious and not be nonlinear, because we're often dealing with a collaboration with one grown-up or with one kid, whether it's finding a book or creating a lesson. And I think that school, because there's like a lot of human people, right? It's very like beautiful and very explosive alchemy that occurs, but you have to be moving all the time forward. And so having that a little bit of extra space is something that I wish for everybody in a school building.
I love that so much, Sam. Thank you.
And I think as you were talking, Sam, I was thinking about how that's also what we hope we create for the librarians when they come and learn with us, is that feeling of spaciousness and that ability to follow your curiosity and not necessarily have to have a destination in mind or a linear goal. But that is a culture, like you said, Lynn, it's a culture of learning together. And once you've experienced that culture for yourself, it's easier to imagine how to create that kind of culture of learning in the space that you lead.
Thank you. Another thought that came to my mind is in my early teaching career, we had one library. I worked in a district. There were 3 high schools, 3 middle schools, and many elementary schools. And early in my career, there was one librarian, full-time librarian per building. And then as budgets became tighter and electives began to be cut, we saw that happening in our libraries as well. So the one librarian from our building now had to oversee 3 libraries in 3 buildings. And eventually that was phased out to part-time staff in the media center, people without backgrounds in library sciences who became kind of the checker outers of the books, kind people, good people, but with lacking maybe the depth of experience and knowledge that you have. And so I wonder, what is the state of librarians? Is it still, I hope that where I worked, that was an isolated incident, because after hearing everything you talked about today, we know just how important your job, your role, your careers are, and your role in kids' lives.
Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about how much you guys fought and then successfully got, in Oakland? I think Sam should talk about what's happened in Oakland in the last 20 or so years in the school libraries. It's incredible.
A wild ride, guys. So I joined OUSD Libraries 9 years ago. I came from the classroom. I was previously a middle school English teacher. And at that point, there were a handful. There were 4 teacher librarians in our district, mostly in middle schools. And there were a lot of unstaffed libraries. I wish I had the numbers in front of me. And I'm somewhere, an OUSD librarian is watching this and feeling really mad at me that I don't have the good percents. But I can tell you that right now, almost 100% of our schools have staffed libraries, whether it's with library techs or with teacher librarians. One of the fight Allison's referring to is that we had a really amazing advocate on our OEA, our union bargaining committee, Samia, and she's a teacher librarian, and she fought to have teacher librarians in secondary schools be a part of our teacher contract. And so now we have 4 teacher librarians represented in our contract, which is similar and on par with districts like Los Angeles and San Francisco, right? These huge school districts that are doing it. They have it in like all their secondary schools, but we're working on it, right? And like that's an enormous gain to not even having teacher librarians mentioned at all. And so like over the course of the last 9 years, I went from being one of 4 to the only one for a little while to like one of a couple of people were doing things in different roles, but like had the right credential, but the wrong job title, to now we have like a real teacher librarian community of practice. We have almost 100% of OUSD libraries are staffed. And even when it's somebody who doesn't necessarily have that background, like an MLIS or school library training, like Diablo Valley College is a really wonderful library tech program that some of our library techs have gone through. Often the people in those library tech roles are people from the school community, and they can bring this like knowledge, this deep knowledge of their context that like, if I just rolled up with an MLIS and was me, but had never worked at that school, like I couldn't do it, right? And that's one of the things I love about Lead by Learning too, is that it's like a really differentiated form of PD, right? Where like anybody who is compassionate and caring and interested in moving their work forward, no matter what your experience level is, like can access that and make it really beautiful. So yeah, we've come a long, long way in Oakland, and I hope to see it keep growing.
I do think we need to name that there are a lot of unstaffed school libraries, Lynn, and what you experienced is not that unusual, and it really differs from district to district. But I hope that people out there who are like listening, watching this, understand that it is a role that matters and it's worth fighting for. And if you have the opportunity to support school librarians in the school district that you live in, that it's worth that advocacy and it's worth the money, because it does matter for students and for teachers.
Yeah. And I want to point out too that like, a handful of people really made a huge difference in the trajectory of OUSD libraries being what it is right now versus what you described, Lynn. Right? Like Allison is one of them. Like we have, lots of really amazing library folks like Jeannie Bruland, who's our secondary literacy coordinator, who like are fighting for libraries and making sure that they stay a piece in the pie.
Well, I'll be a much more active advocate after tonight. So keep my ears open because your role is so very important. I had another question. I know you are jack of many trades in a way in the work that you do. And we've talked about that over the course of the last hour. I think I saw this on the Lead by Learning information about the community of practice, that there was a statement that said libraries are the heart of literacy, which I guess I wanted to bring the conversation back to literacy. And I wondered just maybe for each of you what your favorite memories are or are of nurturing literacy?
Oh, dang. Okay. When I was a very first year English teacher, I was a first year English teacher in the Oakland Unified School District, and it can be really sink or swim. And it was for me a pretty tough year. We had a big rotating cast of principals and not a lot of mentors for me. And so I kind of picked a book and I taught the book at the end of the year. It was The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. And I know, like, leave the author out of it for a second. It's a great book. And so I had a kid, we were reading the book in class, we're doing all the work, whatever. And we get to this part in the book and this kid looks up at me and goes, I didn't know books could be like this. And I was like, oh my God, like a lot of books are like this. And it was just like such an exciting, genuine moment. And I sometimes think school books can be, they get painted as boring. And this was just such a yeah, I got
them. Thanks, Sam.
We have a big independent reading program at Berkeley High for 9th and 10th grade in particular, but across grade levels. And my heart kind of rises when I think about how much kids seem to enjoy talking about books that they like to read. I'm a huge reader and I read a lot of different kinds of things. And it's so joyful. This isn't a specific memory, but just that feeling of when a kid is like, I read that. And I'll say, I read it too. And our eyes light up. And I'm so glad to be here at school for kids to have someone to have that conversation with, and I think it's really affirming for them as readers to know that other people get dorkily excited about books sometimes too.
I can answer from so many levels. I mean, I have my own kids, so to have them fall in love with books, and then I taught 2nd and 3rd grade for a long time, so lots of stories there. But as I'm hearing Sam and Allison talk, I'm also thinking about the power of people coming together to think about their own work that supports the literacy of literally thousands and thousands of kids are affected by the improvements in practice that the librarians are making in the spaces that they lead. And so to me, it's just such a tremendous privilege to have just a tiny part in supporting them and thinking about what do they want to see happen in their libraries? How are they going to know if it's happening? And what are the tiny tweaks that they're going to make on a daily basis, knowing that those tweaks are then rippling out over so many experiences of learning across their systems. So that's what came to mind for me.
Thank you. It's probably too late, but I want to become a librarian.
Never too late. One of us.
Yeah.
You're always welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Mel?
Thanks, Lynn. As always, we'd like to close out with something actionable. I mean, especially because we just talked a little bit about advocacy, right? So I want to invite all of you to maybe share one small step that anyone who cares deeply about libraries, what they can do to strengthen either the collaboration piece or just care or even the community inquiry within their own libraries. Any thoughts on that?
I guess if you are somebody who works in a school, stop by your school library and talk to your library staff member and tell them about something you're working on and ask them to join you on it, because it doesn't have to be research. It doesn't have to be reading. They want to support you.
I would say go to the library yourself, be a patron, engage with the process, engage with the library. Don't see it as something you'll do in a few years. Like, do it now. Be it the school library or the public library, because those interactions with the library all kind of feed to the same place of strengthening libraries of all different sorts. Use the library.
And I would say, there's so much in the narratives now about what's not working at schools and places like libraries. And so I think a really powerful thing to do is to notice what is working, ask an educator or ask a librarian, tell me what's going well in your library, tell me a story of success, and really spread those messages that there is so much that's going right in our schools and with our educators and their communities.
Love that. I cannot believe we've been here for an hour. We could be here for another hour, I'm quite sure. So many more thoughts and questions for all of you, but it is time to close out. So I want to say thank you to Lynn, of course, for bringing your curiosity and your unique lens to this conversation. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Sarah, of course. Sarah, Sam, Allison, such a pleasure to really share this time with all of you. You've given us, a lot of gems, so many things to think about, ponder, put into action. It was just a really great magical hour. Thank you so much for that. And then to all of you who are joining us live or watching the recording, you can continue to see what Allison and Sam are up to by following their libraries on Instagram. So we'll make sure to pop those up so that you can scan the QR codes or take a look at their at Berkeley High Library. And I think the other one is at Calvin Simmons Library.
That's us.
So follow them along on Instagram. We also want to extend a very special thank you to Sarah's organization, Lead by Learning. Don't forget to find out more about all of their fantastic programs and initiatives, including, of course, this library staff community of practice that we learned about today. So thanks again. Have a very, very happy holiday season, everyone. We'll see you back next year in 2026. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you.